and get this thing going. All right, the recording is on. This is lesson 6 of Zero to Hero, the Dataverse quest. We have a very special friend here, Sara, presenting her second lesson. And there's a load of cool people here on the call today. Pranav, Norm Young, Mary Thompson. We have Andre from Germany, and my friend Jonas here as well, and a few friends from Sweden, Victoria. So it's a full one, full of cool people. Sara, take it away. The floor is yours. I will shut up and be quiet here in my corner.
Thank you. Let me share my PowerPoint. Present. I've tried that present in Teams button in PowerPoint like several times, and it's never worked. And it did not work today either. Okay, let's share the old-fashioned way then. Here we go. Wrong screen. I'm like a newbie at this. What is going on? Hold on. I'll do this instead. Okay. Now you hopefully see my face. So welcome to the second session of Zero to Hero regarding business logic in Dataverse. I know a few of you were with me the last Thursday, but for you who weren't, and for you who have no clue who this woman is, my name is Sara Lagerquist. I work as a business and application architect. And someone is speaking French to me. I'm a business and application architect at CRMK, which is a Swedish Stockholm-based company. I've been working here for about 3 years. I started out as a user. So I was kind of an administrator who got CRM 2011 implemented, and I fell in love with the potential of it. That means that I have no formal education in IT, so I'm no code focused. I do configuration of all types. I think what Amy Holden would call me would be an ABC. Anything but code is what I focus on. I'm a Microsoft BizApp MVP. I've been awarded 3 times so far. And since of last year, I'm cancer fucking free too. If you want to get in contact with me, I do have Twitter. I also have a blog where I occasionally post things about Power Platform, mostly about Power Automate and Dataverse in some sort. I also have a LinkedIn, of course, or if you're really old-fashioned and want to do the classic email, I do have an email address too that you can reach out to me on. Okay, so agenda, this is the slide from last time that I did. Last time was focusing on Zero, what business logic, what options do we have and how do they work, and demos of the really basic features in Dataverse. Today, we're knocking it up quite a few levels because we're going to talk about when and why. So not so much demos. We're going to go into quite complex things about design, which could be quite a handful. So I'm not promising that I will talk for a full hour today because your mind might explode. Uh, okay, so let's dig into it. Why choosing the right type of business logic is so important. Well, it affects very many different things. One thing it affects is usability. Do you remember when I did two types of calculations with two types of business logic? And it was quite a different experience for the user because one needed the user to save to actually do the calculation, and the other one was immediate. So depending on what you're trying to achieve, um, of course, the options you have, the business logic you choose, affects usability. It also affects performance, which many people forget when they design and choose what business logic to use, which is something that we're going to talk a bit about later on. Total cost of ownership. Of course, it's really important to have that in mind when you choose business logic, that you don't want it to over complex things because there's maintenance cost that comes with any type of business logic. Can someone today count how many times I will say business logic and then report back to me? Thank you very much. Also, of course, business logic affects technical debt. If you choose the wrong thing, if you do something and there's a better way, you're going to have technical debt, and that's one of the worst things you can have. You don't want that. So this is my mantra, my signum, everything I talk about all the time with customers, with colleagues. The value should always exceed the complexity of the solution. Remember that, and I'll get back to that in 2 slides. Okay, so it's impossible to talk about business logic without talking about requirements. I've seen several times where people pick the tech before they know what problem they want to solve. It's like, oh, I think virtual agent seems pretty cool. I'm going to build myself a chatbot or implement a chatbot for my company. And it's like, what are you trying to solve? Always start with the requirement and what your need is. You need to know who, what, why, and when. I usually capture my requirements as user stories. That's what I've been taught. That's what I feel gives me the most value. And a very common mistake people do when they do use user stories is that they do the first 2 bits and forget about the third. So they do the as a and then add the role that's gonna perform I want, and then the task that needs to be performed, and then they stop. And it's usually the because, which will help you to determine what business logic would be the best suited for this requirement. Then there's something called requirement fulfillment. So if we capture our requirements and aim to fulfill them for 100%, of course we should aim for that. Of course, that's a target that we want to do everything that our customer or employer or whoever we are building for wants us to do. But that could mean that it's very difficult to find a solution. And that could also mean that you need to build something really complex, so the value actually becomes less than the complexity that brings. So part of my job and part of everyone's job who is building on this platform, who is determining what business logic to use, are responsible to question the requirements. and try to come up with compromises. What if you suggest solutions that fulfills the requirement by 85%? You probably will get several solutions that are possible compared to if you try to maybe find one thing that can solve it. It would bring less value since it's not fulfilling the whole requirement, but it will also bring less complexity. And I think it's very common, or I've seen it's quite common, that you don't even take the discussion that there's potential solutions that won't fit the whole requirement. Usually the part that I skip could be like, okay, can you trigger this manually instead of automating, because the rules for actually triggering this are really, really complex. But if we can just decide that the user are going to go and trigger that automation on them own, and usually I have customers who are like, yeah, that sounds reasonable, why not? We don't want to pay so many hours to develop something that will give us very little extra value. So yeah, requirement fulfillment, very important. Then it depends. I think this is every architect's favorite sentence. When you are faced with a problem, requirement, or and are asked to, how can we solve this? It's usually it depends. And that's what this session is about. There are so many things to consider the whole time. The platform is really huge nowadays, and there's a lot of options and a lot to keep track of. So it will be, it depends. And it's also a subject matter. When you decide what business logic you feel is the right for this requirement, it's partly subject. Of course, we have some guidelines from Microsoft and more general guidelines, but in the end, it's a subject matter. And I want to take this slide and also point out that how experienced you might be, I'm very sure that all architects, everyone designing solutions, feel insecure about their decisions. Because since there's so much to consider all the time, it's impossible to feel like 100% confident that I picked the right solution. So just take this with you, that you will make mistakes when designing solutions, and it's okay. And this platform is actually unexpectedly forgiving when it comes to making mistakes and having to refactor stuff. Not everything, and those are the things you need to focus about, but in general, it's quite forgiving. But how do we avoid making those mistakes as far as we can? Well, we peer review. I always do this, even though I feel quite confident in my solution, which does happen if it's a small problem. I feel like, okay, I'll always talk to someone, a colleague, a friend, about my problem, my couple of solutions that I have in mind. They can bring their views on it, and I get either more confidence in what I'm choosing, or I get opinions that like a new idea of a way to solve it that might be more simple. Okay, enough with requirements talk. Let's talk about business logic. So I've done an attempt to simplify and categorize the business logic from last time into different categories. Again, this is a simplification, because if you would try to actually divide them completely, it would be very if and buts and so I have 4 categories for which most business logic ends up either once or several times. So a feature or a way to solve something can be in several of these categories. We have visualization. Any way to, and we're talking about business logic that are hiding or showing different columns and rows, the interface of it all, if something is required or not, how it's visualized. Then you have business logic that does validation, which very often goes hand in hand with some type of notification. Not always, but sometimes. And then we have automation. Another way to view these same four categories would be to think of it from a trigger perspective. So you have the visualization logic that happens before something happens, that you need to, you set the stage pretty much. Then you have the logic that happens during an event or trigger. I'm getting distracted because someone is not muted. Which would be validation and notification. And then you have the things that happen after a trigger of some sort, which would be automation. And obviously, I know that most of you are thinking now, like, well, automation can actually happen during. Yes, I know. I've simplified it. Okay, this is simplification of it. So let's talk about our options in visualizations to start with. And I've decided to divide visualization into two more categories. And that's the interface one, which we're going to talk about now. And then it's row and column one, which we're going to talk about later. So what should you consider when you're choosing business logic for the interface? First thing that I have to think about is it a licensed user? Do they have a Power App license? Do they have a dynamic license? Do they not have a license? Then maybe they need to look at portals, or maybe customer voice if they're entering data that I need to capture and they don't need to view data back. Both of these interfaces are based on Dataverse, but they have different variables to them. But licensed users is something to consider. Another thing to consider is how frequent or infrequent the user is. For example, if you have a quite complex process, which of an infrequent user is going to perform, you don't want to build an app and build documentation, and once a month when this user is going to go and do this, they need to look at a manual, they need to figure it out, they're going to make mistakes, they're going to miss something. Building an app that actually guide the users through that perfectly when they're infrequent is really difficult. Then you might want to consider using virtual agents for interface. You have your data in Dataverse, you have Power Automate that actually runs it, but you have virtual agents, which is chatbots, to configure and guide the users through the process. Consider if it's going to be used on a desktop or a tablet or a phone, or maybe and. I like model-driven apps in all of those scenarios because they're responsive. So no matter what you build, they look kind of nice on all of those. But you also have, of course, Pages and Canvas apps that could be a better fit depending on the answer to that question. It's important also to know if the user is going to interact with data on one table or across multiple tables. Because if you know that it's data across multiple tables, maybe a model-driven app is not the best, especially if it's an infrequent user, because it's a lot of saving and clicking to go through all the relationships that to get somewhere. Then maybe you should consider a Canvas app where you can save data in a collection and then put it into different tables and such. You also need to know if you need to support offline mode, because depending on all of these solutions, they are more or less good at offline mode. Yes, that was the interface slide. Yes, of course, you also have PCFs as a potential way to change the interface, or web resources, actually, but they're not recommended as much anymore because PCF. Okay. Let's talk about the other type of visualization, row and columns. What should you consider when you need to have business logic for how to visualize different types of rows and columns? My first question I ask myself is this condition-based logic or user group-based? Which means, is it a group of people who should not be able to see these rows and columns? Or do I need to have a condition based on other data, based on other information, show and hide stuff? Because if it's user based, of course, my first choice would be security, or even model driven apps to use views and sitemaps or different apps for different groups of people. You also have to consider a number of users, because again, performance and how much complexity you want to build for a user group depends on the number of users. If I end up designing a quite complex app and there's 2 users, is that really motivated, or is there other ways to solve what I want to achieve? Is data sensitive or just not required? So it's one thing to hide data that's irrelevant, like you can do with model-driven apps, for example, with the sitemaps and such. But if it's sensitive data, you might want to look into security and maybe go into field level security or business units, depending on how the data is sensitive, on what way you want to hide and show. So my animations is a bit off here. I'm sorry about that. You need to ask yourself if this visualization, this hide and show or whatever it is, needs to be immediate, or if it's enough that it's on save. And again, like I've said a couple times already, a simple way to hide and show stuff would be with views and sitemaps and different type of forms, on save or immediate, depending on your needs. Then you also have JavaScript. The code options will always be able to do most things, and I'm going to go into that later, but you can always resort to code in almost any case. That's why I'm focusing more on the no code parts, because they are the ones that have limitations that you need to consider. We also need to know if it's based on information on related tables or current. And that's because business rules that are quite amazing have a very huge limitation, which is super annoying, in that it's only on current table. You can only build logic on current table. My use cases are most usually that based on the parent's data, I want to show or hide data on or columns on the child. That is not possible with business rule. Then I have to resort to JavaScript or PCFs or something else than business rules. You also need to know if you need to show rows in an other type than the interface, the out of the box interface like model-driven app can offer. For example, PCFs can show the rows in a calendar, or if there's any other type of visualization, I would resort to PCFs first, but there's a little more old tech that are web resources that are built with React that can do quite a lot when it comes to visualization too. Good to be aware of, not good to prioritize. Okay, validation and notification. I put them into the same slide because, as you remember on my timeline, validation and notification is usually something that occurs during an event and usually comes hand in hand. They do have different options to evaluate, but they usually have the same questions to consider. So first off is, do I need data on related tables or current? Same question we had to ask ourselves regarding visualization, and that's because of the business rules limitations. Real-time workflows, though, they can do validations on parent tables or data that are several relationships away and still be real time and give a notification to the user that something is wrong here, you can't do this or you shouldn't do that, which we demoed last time, if you remember. If not, go into YouTube and check out that session. Again, so you need to figure out when it has to trigger. Is it on save or immediate? And if you can't solve your problem with business rules or real-time workflows, you might actually have to resort to JavaScript. And it might not have to be the end of the world because JavaScript are usually not too complex, but it's something that I'm not first to go to JavaScript. You can also use PCF depending on the answer on this question. You also need to know if you should be able to proceed, or the user should be able to proceed or blocked by this notification. Should it just be a notification that they can block? It's just pure information. Or should it actually block them from continuing to do whatever they're going to do? Is it a really important validation or not? An example of that would be duplicate rules. They validate data sets based on the rules you set up, what would consider to be counted as a duplicate, but then it gives the user the option to proceed even though it gets a validation hit. So here you have a validation and notification that you can actually be able to proceed against. That's what I've already said. Action required, or is it information only? And that comes into, is it just information that, like a notification that I should be, oh, that's nice to know, or do we need to save the information somehow? like create a record to follow up some type of task or history post that this has happened, like a logbook or some of that type. It's very important when it comes to notification. Do you need to know if the user received the notification or not? Yep. Is it a flexible set of validation rules or notification? And by that, I mean flexible, complex. Is it, if you would resort to building this business logic into code, is it something that changes a lot? How flexible does it need to be? That type of configuration where maybe you have a table with all the validation in. Yeah. Validate or notify triggering user or other user automation. What I mean is, are we going to give a validation or a notification to the user that actually did something and then trigger the validation? Or is it notifying a completely other user, or maybe even another system? Both of those you need to know, because it's really different business logic depending on it's for the user who is triggering or some other user. So you have Canvas app pages. They can do several types of validation and notification. You have Power Automate. They can't do very good notification on them own, but you have in Dataverse and model-driven apps, you have the quite new feature called in-app notification, model-driven app notification, which is like a toast notification bar. It's records in the background, but this is, for example, what I was talking about is action required. Maybe it should just pop up. I can navigate there, but there doesn't have to be a record that I saw it, that I took action, that I did something. And of course, Power Automate together with email or text messages or push notification can notify you. So Power Automate is obviously very flexible, but it's not immediate. So if you're in an app, I had a colleague actually who was going to build something that needed to validate on a related table if he were able to create a post of this type, and it was data on related tables, and it was not user group based, so we couldn't control it with the security. So his idea was to send a notification to that person that created a record in Teams, where they get like, hey, what you just did, we're not allowed. Go back to the system and change that. And that's not really good user design. If I have to change application to get my notification. So I suggested that we go with a real-time workflow instead, so you get immediate information that, okay, this was not allowed. I have to go about it and not in another way. Plugins can do both validation and notification because they're it's code. They can do pretty much anything. Okay, one more slide. Automation. What should you consider when you have requirements on automation? Does it has to be immediate or on save or asynchronous? Because we're talking about what we demoed a bit last week, that the most complex fields, they trigger on save, while business rules, they trigger immediately. Same with real-time workflows trigger on save, and Power Automate is asynchronous. So it's really important that you know what you want to achieve here and choosing the right tech for that. You also need to know how often will this trigger. Maybe it's not the best to trigger 300 flows a minute or whatever. Maybe you need to consider if you're going to use plugins for bulk updates or whatever type of automation it is you're trying to do. You have Canvas app and Pages 2 to automate stuff. Again, with my animations. There we go. Does the data need to be stored in Dataverse? If we're talking about a calculation or having data created just to do some type of automation that will end up in another result, ask yourself, does it has to be stored in Dataverse? Can you use Canvas apps or Pages, again, to save the data in a collection and then actually save only what needs to be stored in Dataverse? Or maybe you can use Power BI because you actually don't have to have the data stored in Dataverse. It's just a calculation or summarization or some way to view the data. So is the trigger simple or with a complex set of rules? Is exactly what we talked about when it comes to validation and notification too. How flexible do you need to build stuff? Is the automation some type of bulk updates? Because we have a really quite new cool feature where you can, with low code and PowerFX, build new command bar buttons, and they can validate stuff. They can send you notification. They can ask you for confirmation and update and do error handling. It's a quite nice way to handle bulk updates nowadays. If the automation you're trying to do is a calculation, you need to consider a few more things. Is it based on user input or other automation? Again, the trigger of it, you have to take into consideration because you might affect data quality if it's a user input, for example. How will you control that? Also, if it's other automation that is triggering calculation or automation in turn, you should be aware of creating loops so they don't trigger each other and just go round and round and round. Different type of business logic not all can do complex calculation like add days or add hours. Calculated fields can, I think real-time workflows can, Power Automate can, but pretty sure business rule can't do that, for example. Again, plugins and PCFs are is code and can do pretty much anything. So all these questions is, I can guess that maybe you feel like your brain is exploding. There's so much to evaluate every time that you're making small design choices about business logic. So I've made another simplification for you to see if this might help you. And it's my evaluation order. In what order I generally go through when I prioritize what business logic I choose. There are, of course, exceptions. I'll end with a few of those. My first evaluation, if we're talking business logic in Dataverse, would be to build a model-driven app and configure that. Can I solve my requirements with views, sitemaps, and security? That would keep the complexity to a minimum, but hopefully give a lot of value. So that's the first place I go. Can I solve it with this? Second Secondly, I'd go to data model configuration, and then we're talking about adding these complex fields, adding new tables and columns, and because again, you need to be aware of how the data is stored with the complex field. If it takes performance because they're doing real-time calculations, maybe you should think about it differently if there's a lot of data. My third option would be to go to complex configuration, which would be more complex business logic. Business rules, workflows, Power Automate, the command bar. I briefly talked about doing bulk updates, for example. My fourth choice would be to use an existing PCF. So a PCF is a reusable code component, which you can use in many solutions. There's very many open source PCFs. Maybe you have a dev department at your company that actually build PCFs to use in several apps. So that would be my fourth option, to actually use an existing PCF. But again, you have to consider total cost of ownership. What happens if you need to extend this PCF to handle more than what's actually included? Do you have a dev on your team that can do that? Or are you stuck with the only version there is? And if so, is there other business logic that you would prefer that you can actually be in charge of and control and edit? My fifth option would be to look at Microsoft first-party apps or third-party products. We're talking about logic that might be really hard to replicate. For example, we can talk about Power Virtual Agents being almost like a first-party app, but it's not. It's a product. It's really hard to do that only with code or only with the rest of the. You can't do configuration that looks like a chatbot. So since you can't replicate, that would definitely be my fifth choice. After that, I put Canvas apps and pages. I know it's low code, but as of now, ALM is quite tricky still. There is a lot of maintenance that takes more time than you think when it comes to Canvas apps. So I don't really buy into the Microsoft, anyone can do an app and it takes 2 hours, and then it's not that easy with the low code. So that's why that comes so far down in my evaluation order. I don't say that I don't do it. I do it. I love to do Canvas apps too, but it's almost last resort. Last resort is to ask a developer to build me a new PCF or the other code options, plugins, Azure Functions, JavaScript, for example. So this is my normal evaluation order. There's exceptions, like I mentioned. If I'm taking over a solution for a customer who already have an implementation and they have a lot of code implemented, this would not be my evaluation order, because then I have so much other stuff to consider already. Then I might actually go with code first to keep the solution more simple by using the same business logic instead of mixing and matching. But this whole discussion that I'm putting code last takes us into the no code versus code discussion. So I have to just say a few words about this. It's been an effective discussion for many years, actually. I think it's starting to disappear more and more. But in the end, no code and low code enables more people to develop business logic. People like me, people like citizen developers, and which makes development faster and easier to maintain, and lots of other pros. But it's really not about no code versus code, that you should only use either or. Microsoft talks about it as their no cliff story, that when no code and low code is not sufficient, that is when you extend the platform with being able to put things into code, which is not possible in no and low code. Me and Scott Durow also created this hashtag 2.5 years ago, I think now, that's called Pro Code No Code Unite, because to actually not be so much about no code versus code, it's about uniting and picking the right type of tech for the right situations. Like I've been saying this whole session, it depends. It depends on the situation. Pick the right tech for that. For example, we can have, if we would just compare Power Automate and a plugin, there could be a Power Automate flow that would be 80 actions that would only be 5 rows of code, but it could also be the other way around, that trying to do some weird integration with SharePoint and Dataverse is 5 actions in Power Automate, but trying to do that with code would be a nightmare. So again, picking the right tech for the right need. Yes, I'm almost at the end, bear with me, peeps. My design principles, a summary of what I've been talking about today. First of all, know your requirements. Do not pick tech before you know your requirements and the actual need. And ask yourself all these questions that I've listed. And then if you've asked those, you will probably be in a good position to make a solution decision. Requirement fulfillment. Dare to take a discussion, dare to compromise on the requirements. I think most people who are uncomfortable with those type of discussions would be surprised how often a customer or a boss or someone who has the requirement are willing to compromise, because they get the result quicker and faster and more efficient. My evaluation order is based on simplest solution first. That's what I evaluate first. That's where I would go. Keep complexity to a minimum to make it maintainable as far as possible. Peer review of solution options. Ask a friend, ask a colleague, ask your mother if this is a good idea. This platform is not made for one person to know it all. That's impossible. Take into considerations other people's views on the same problem. And last of all, the most boring design principle, but always be aware of additional costs that your design can bring. Be aware of licenses and storage costs and API costs and everything that can bring additional costs. You need to know, because you do not want to surprise the requirement owner with like, oh, by the way, it's going to cost 3 times as much just to maintain it. Is that okay? Nope. Okay, I'm done. Do we have any questions? No.
Everybody, if you have questions, you can unmute yourself, put your camera on, and go for it.
And if you're uncomfortable with talking in a Teams meeting like this with several others, you're always welcome to contact me directly if you have a problem that you want to discuss, or a solution or a business logic choice, or any comments of this overall. here are my contact information again.
I don't have any questions at this time, but I just wanted to say, thank you so much for this presentation. Super, super informative. I think, we can always go to documents to find the formulas and that type of stuff, but being able to take your expertise and say, this is how we break down business requirements is really, truly priceless. And especially when it is what I would call Dataverse, you know what I mean, in Power Platform specific, super informational. I'll probably bother the heck out of you later after I watch this video 9,000 times and then be like, well, now I don't know this. Now I don't know this. So I just wanted to say thank you so much.
Oh, thank you so much. I'll stop sharing my screen so maybe I can see your face.
I think I'm muted here. Now, I think my favorite part was the evaluation order. I mean, I do quite a few POCs for different agencies here in North America, and a lot of times as a consultant, you trip up in some of the areas you mentioned, and it comes back to bite you at the very last stage of the project. You don't think too much about how you're going to expose data, and then at the end the user says, well, I like that I can see this information, but you're missing a bunch of columns and views, right?
Yeah.
So now at the very end of the project, after you have developed lots of cool stuff, the user is complaining about a form or a view. So I really like the evaluation sequence. I agree with you on the low code and pro code approach. I mean, I don't think it's a one camp versus the other. I'm a pro developer. I do a lot of code still, but code for me today is my last resort. I'm not going to develop something that Microsoft has already done. They have a lot more manpower than I do to get things done. So I usually use out of the box. And again, as an independent consultant with a small business, it gives me a lot more uh, return when I use that approach. Instead of hiring a dev or doing development myself, takes more time and more resources. So
I also usually talk to my customers early on about complexity and the total cost of ownership and all of those parts. So when I go into that discussion, if they might want to compromise on a requirement, they're way more open because they're like, oh, okay, so maintaining this part will be so much more expensive because I wanted an automated trigger instead of me going in once a month and triggering something. No, I'll go with that instead. So just like talk to the customers early on about the complexity of solutions, and you'll get a lot further with the fulfillment part.
that is awesome. Now I really really like it. I don't have any
I can
additional
just
comments.
ask something. That's
Yeah.
okay. I think, sorry, I mean, when you talk about when you're implementing the business rules, I mean, if they're hard rules, then you can't always do it on the client side. If you do a PCF or anything, just do a filter in the views and so on, that's not good enough. I mean, if it's the rules, then you can use the security or going server side. You're creating plugins, or I would even say maybe the automation, but you probably have it more harder to make sure that you know the right information.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah,
you
really
have
good choice.
you have to miss all these low code, and so because it may be soft sort of, not the same the good things in, well, that's making information.
Agreed. And I think you're kind of into a thing that I was taught by you all those years ago, that if it's business critical logic, it should not be client side. So when you look through this evaluation order too, don't pick the client side type of business logic, because you can overrule and go backside. And what would happen if it's something called by automation and you have very important validation just client side? Ugh.
It's like if you go to my session, then you'll see how you find all information that's not found in the views. But if you go in other ways like fetch XML builder or any other tools, then you can sort of go behind the scene.
Cool. So he's pitching for his own session later on a bit.
Yeah, no,
Sneaking in promotion. It's fine.
He's already got it. I spoke with Jonas. I don't know if it's a secret to anybody, and it may be a feeling that's shared across the community, where professionals in the community really look up to Jonas as an example, not only technically speaking, but also am I sharing the right screen? Maybe not. Let me stop here. So a lot of people admire him not only for the technical content, but of course the personal story of battling against a stroke and coming back as strong as he has, or staying strong throughout the ordeal. So I kind of,
like me and Sara, we all are sick here in Sweden.
we spoke offline, and I invited Jonas to present a session within this or a lesson within this session as well. So he's down here, will be the last to kind of seal the deal on this Dataverse program. So I'm pretty excited about it. For next week, though, we're gonna have Danish Naglikar. He's going to present JavaScript programming again, zero to hero style. He's gonna start slow and then build up. Of course, JavaScript is code, so I think it's important, even for folks who are low code or citizen developers, to understand what the capabilities are, to be able to make the evaluation that Sara described earlier on. I don't know how to do everything, but I know that it's possible to do some things with JavaScript. So
it is good if you know the complexity of a JavaScript implementation. Maybe I won't write the JavaScript myself, but if I'm going to compare this option to that, I need to know how complex will this JavaScript be. So yeah, I think it's very useful for everyone to know.
And this is going to be what we look at in the next few lessons. So the next 4 lessons will be more pro dev, but again, with the same vibe. We go from zero to hero, so that even for citizen developers, if they don't want to become experts in plugins or JavaScript and whatnot, they will know what the pro dev tools are available should they need to evaluate using one versus the other. So JavaScript next week, then plugin and custom workflow activity by Michael Watch. Michael is one of the writers of the COE and some of the stuff that's coming up for governance. So he has a lot of insight there as well. Then we do 2 additional sessions with Danish, again on PCF development. And for the month of March, we have Whale Hands. If you know about Azure DevOps pipelines for Dynamics 365, one of the first MVPs we started talking about it, and actually one of the first templates that I used for Azure DevOps for Dynamics 365 at the time was written by Will. So he will be talking about ALM and COE in March, and then Jonas will close this Dataverse quest with a Fetch XML builder. All right, so that's what we're looking at for the following days. And if there is suggestion from the team here of what we should talk about next, let me know, and we'll try to put together another mentorship. But that's what we're looking at. Question, comments, anything you want to say, unmute yourself. You're free to speak here. No more? All right. I wonder, we have a few folks here that I didn't see in the beginning of the call. I see Batten, Badger, he's here, Mary. I'm not sure if you guys would be comfortable putting your cameras up so I can get a screenshot.
Hi
Oh,
there.
got his. Uh,
Yeah.
if you can, it'll be great. I can get a screenshot of you, especially today that I got my hair done. So if you can give me a big smile, I'm gonna get a screenshot in 3 seconds. 3, 2, 1, go. All right, I think I got it. All
Looks
right,
like we
everybody.
had fun.
This
We
is
did.
beautiful. I love it.
This-
Okay, we'll see you next week with Dennis Naglikar. I hope the JavaScript theme of the session doesn't scare anybody away. I hope you see the same faces next week. Okay, take care. Have a great Thursday and weekend. Bye bye.
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 Bye. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.